What's up guys, John here, and today I'm going to be showing you how I implement API rate limiting in my applications. So before we get into the how, let's talk a little bit about why you'd want to implement API rate limiting within all of the endpoints in your applications. So the number one reason you're going to want to implement API rate limiting is to protect yourself from distributed or simple denial of service attacks. And what a denial of service attack is when a user is sending way more requests to your endpoints than the average user, possibly degrading server performance or bringing down the server altogether. So one of the ways you can protect yourself from that type of attack is implementing API rate limiting. Now, there are a plethora of ways that you can protect yourself from DDoS or simple DOS attacks, but API rate limiting is essentially what I'm going to give you a high-level overview of today. Alright, so with that out of the way, now I'm just going to give you a little bit of a verbal, high-level overview of how I implement API rate limiting within my application, and then we're going to get into a little bit of code so you can get a little bit of a better picture of how I'm implementing API rate limiting within my applications. So the first step that I take in order to implement API rate limiting within my applications is anytime any user is hitting any of my endpoints, I grab their IP and then I throw it in the database. From there, I count how many times has that IP hit any of my endpoints within the last 5 minutes. Now, that time interval is completely specific to my application. You can put any time interval that you feel is appropriate. Now, within my application, I make sure users aren't hitting any of my endpoints more than 75 times within a 5-minute interval. So it's very important that you go through your application, see how many requests are appropriate for any given time interval, and cutting off the user from there. So in order to cut off the user, if they do exceed that limit, I'm returning an error. Now it's very important that your UI handles that error pretty gracefully, but today we're just talking strictly server side, and it's appropriate enough to just return an error if they do exceed that number of requests.
Alright, so let's get into the code. Now, I'm most comfortable programming my APIs in C#, but remember, this is just a high-level overview, so any knowledge that you take from this lesson should be easily transferable to the language that you're most comfortable with. So this line here, I'm grabbing the user's IP and saving it into this IP variable. Now, ignore all of these object instantiations, and let's move on to line, 32? So in line 32, I'm passing the IP to this log IP and check for DDoS function. Now, I'm a huge fan of very descriptive function names because not only does it increase readability, it allows you to know exactly what this function is doing. And I also implemented the repository pattern, which is just a pattern to encapsulate all related queries into a specific class. So let's go ahead and check out the implementation of this log IP and check for DDoS function. So what it is it instantiates a variable called too-many-requests to false. Now, just to jump ahead a little bit, this too-many-request variable will be set to true if we do hit that limit of requests that we want to set. So what we're doing is we're passing the IP into this query right here. And the first query is inserting their IP into the database. And then we're querying the database and checking, how many times has this user hit the database within the last 5 minutes. And we're going ahead and parsing that data and making sure it doesn't exceed the number 10. Now, our initial implementation was set to 75, but just for testing purposes, we set this to 10. And if they do exceed that limit, we're setting this too-many-request variable to true. Now, it won't be set to true unless we hit this line right here, and it's just going to be returned. So let's go ahead and go back to this line of code. So if the user did exceed the too-many-requests, if they did exceed our API rate limit, it's going to set this rate limit IP variable to true. And we're checking if the IP should be rate limited. We're going to return this string, which just says slow down. We have found you were making too many requests. And the important part here is there's a lot of functionality, a lot of queries, a lot of actions being done if they do get past this rate limit IP. So what we're doing is we're stopping them in their tracks and we're returning out of the function and saying you are sending way too many requests. So now that we've walked through the code implementation, I'm going to go ahead and fire up Postman, send some requests to this endpoint, and test and make sure this is actually working. So I'm going to grab Postman. Alright, there's Postman. Let's move this up here. Postman is just a very cool tool that allows you to send requests to API endpoints. So if you don't know about Postman, do maybe a few tutorials on it. It's a very cool tool to add to your toolkit. So we're sending a post request to this endpoint API/start. I'm giving the endpoint some JSON data that it just needs to work. So we're going to go ahead and fire off these requests, and we're going to fire it off 10 times and make sure it stops us from being able to send those any more requests. So we're going to send it once. Alright, so this is just an error message for the application. They're already searching, so they shouldn't really be sending any more requests to this endpoint. But we're not going to rate limit them until they hit that 10. So we're going to send 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I could have written a JavaScript script in order to do this a little bit quicker, but I figured let's use Postman in this tutorial. Awesome. So as soon as we hit 10, we get this response saying, slow down, we have found you are making too many requests. So awesome. There we go. And with that, we have implemented API rate limiting.
Alright, so if you found that video helpful, please like, please subscribe, and remember, I'm here to learn. So if there's anything I could have done better in my coding implementation or the video style, let me know in the comment section below, and thank you for your support.